The transport shuddered as it broke through the exosphere, its hull vibrating with a sound like old bones cracking under pressure. Through the viewport, the curve of the Earth receded into a wash of blue and white, replaced by the dark velvet of orbital night. Commander Dallin Vyrek sat in silence, his gloved hands folded over a datapad he hadn't looked at in hours. His daughter, Lyra, leaned against the glass, chewing on a nutrient stick with restless defiance. She had the kind of expression that said she didn't believe in ghosts but expected to find one anyway. "It looks dead," she said finally, squinting at the massive shadow that loomed ahead, a fortress adrift in the void. "You sure this thing's not going to crumble the second we dock?" Dallin didn't answer right away. The ship's NAV lights flashed across the hull of Aegis 9, revealing its surface, pitted metal, fractured antennae, scorched plating from wars so old that even the stars had forgotten their scars. The old fortress hung there like a tomb in orbit, motionless, soundless, a relic from when humanity still dared to look outward. "It's older than dead," Dallin muttered, finally. "It's forgotten." The shuttle's guidance system beeped a warning as it entered the station's docking range. For a relic, Aegis 9 still carried an air of quiet menace. Massive turrets, the size of orbital tugs, were locked in standby, their barrels sealed by frost. Shield arrays hung like petrified wings around its core structure. And there, at its heart, a vast ring, rotating so slowly it was almost imperceptible, the command citadel where the base's mind once resided. Lyra tapped a few commands into the console. No response. "The beacon's dead. No power signatures at all." "Then explain the gravity pull," Dallin said. The transport trembled as invisible clamps seized it, aligning its nose with a narrow docking bay. "It just took us in." Lyra frowned. "That's impossible. We didn't send any request." The clamps locked with a metallic thud that echoed through the cabin. Lights flickered across the console. For the first time, the station responded, a deep, resonant hum, felt more in the bones than in the ears. "Automated system?" she asked, trying to sound amused. "Or something that remembers its job," Dallin said, rising from his seat. His joints ached, a reminder of years spent fighting in gravity wells heavier than Earth's. The uniform he wore was outdated, patches faded, edges frayed, yet it still carried a trace of authority. He holstered his sidearm out of habit more than need. They stepped into the airlock. The doors hissed open, releasing a gust of sterile cold that smelled faintly of ozone and decay. The corridor beyond was dark, its walls covered in frost and silence. Lyra activated her wrist light, sweeping the beam across the hull. The walls were engraved with markings, the old insignia of the Bastion network, a symbol long since erased from official records. "Creepy," she said, her voice echoing softly. "Feels like walking through a museum nobody visits." Dallin traced the edge of the emblem with his glove. The metal was cold, but beneath the surface, he could feel faint warmth, a pulse, like something sleeping just under the skin of the station. "This place was built to last forever," he said. Maybe it did. They moved deeper, through corridors sealed by time and vacuum. Frozen debris floated lazily in the microgravity, tools, fragments of panels, a single child's toy sphere, spinning endlessly in the dark. Lyra caught it, frowned, and let it go again. Who leaves something like this on a war fortress? Families lived here, Dallin said. Engineers. Officers. The Bastion stations weren't just weapons, they were worlds. Lyra scoffed. And we inherited one. Lucky us. They reached the central elevator shaft. Dallin keyed in manual override, but the console rejected every code. Lyra leaned over his shoulder. Mind if I try? She connected her wristcom to the panel, running a bypass. The screen flickered to life, showing an ancient interface with symbols she didn't recognize. This language is pre-Federation, she murmured. It shouldn't even register. The interface blinked, and suddenly a voice, low, mechanical, genderless, whispered through the intercom, lineage query, authorization required. Lyra froze. What was that? Dallin stared at the console. The phrase repeated, this time with faint distortion. Lineage query, authorization required. He hesitated, then said, Commander Dallin Vyrek. Authorization code. Before he could finish, the system interrupted with a rejection tone. Access denied. Lineage incomplete. Lyra gave a nervous laugh. Guess it doesn't like you, Dad. The console blinked again. Secondary signature required. She frowned. Secondary? You mean? He nodded slowly. Try saying your name. She rolled her eyes but leaned in anyway. Lyra Vyrek, daughter of. The words had barely left her mouth when the lights above them blazed to life. The floor rumbled, and every dormant conduit in the shaft came alive with a cascade of golden light, pulsing outward like veins reawakening. The temperature rose instantly, the frost on the walls hissing into steam. What the hell? She gasped, stepping back. The voice returned, but this time it was louder, clearer, filled with something almost human. Command lineage verified. Welcome home. Dallin's heart pounded. He turned toward the shaft as it began to move, platforms aligning themselves, magnetic lifts humming to life after centuries of silence. Somewhere deep within the fortress, vast engines stirred, exhaling dust and memory. Lyra looked at him, wide-eyed. You didn't do that. He didn't answer. He was staring past her, toward the end of the corridor where a faint, rhythmic pulse of light echoed through the dark, a beacon, alive again after generations of silence. The hum of the fortress deepened, spreading through the floor and walls until it was indistinguishable from the sound of their own hearts. Outside, the orbital night shifted as the great ring of Aegis 9 began to rotate. The ancient fortress was waking, one breath at a time. Lyra whispered, Dad, what did we just wake up? And far below them, in the station's heart, something vast and unseen opened its eyes. The moment the light stabilized, the station seemed to exhale, as though it had been holding its breath for centuries. Dallin and Lyra stood in the central chamber, the glow from the pulse spilling across polished alloy walls etched with decades of forgotten insignia. The air was still thin, but breathable, recycled through filtration systems that whirred softly beneath the surface. Every surface vibrated with latent energy, like the base itself was acknowledging their presence. Lyra's hand hovered over a console, her fingers trembling slightly. It's alive, she whispered. The words felt absurd in the silence that followed, yet she couldn't deny it. Something beyond circuitry, beyond mere programming, had stirred. A soft hum emanated from the far wall, where a massive sphere of alloy and transparent composite was embedded like a mechanical heart. It glowed faintly with patterns that shifted and spiraled like living circuits. The core, Dallin muttered. His voice carried both awe and wariness. This is what powers the station. Or, it was supposed to. Lyra approached the sphere, her reflection dancing across its surface. It's waiting for us, she said, almost to herself. I don't know why, but it's waiting. Dallin studied her, trying to measure her tone. There was curiosity, yes, but also a thread of fear. He could sense it in the way her shoulders stiffened, in the way her fingers twitched against the console. She had always been fearless on the surface, yet something about Aegis 9 demanded reverence. A series of lights blinked across the core, patterns shifting faster now, responding to their presence. Then, unexpectedly, a voice filled the chamber. Smooth, metallic, yet undeniably aware. Lineage confirmed. Command signature recognized. Awakening sequence initialized. Lyra jumped back, startled. Did it just speak? Dallin's eyes narrowed. It's intelligent. Sentinel. He remembered the old dossiers from the archives, vague references to a defense AI codenamed Sentinel, built to oversee the orbital bastions. Stories of its omniscience had been dismissed as propaganda. Yet here it was, speaking to them directly, as if expecting their arrival. The sphere's surface rippled, forming geometric patterns that resembled data streams in 3 dimensions. Lyra's mind raced to comprehend the alien logic. "It's showing me something," she murmured, tracing a pattern with her finger. Images coalesced in midair, schematics, battle logs, orbital charts from centuries ago. She could almost feel the station's memory pulsing into her mind. Dallin stepped closer. "What is it showing you?" Lyra's voice shook slightly. "It's history. All of it. The wars the Bastion fought, the fleets it destroyed, the systems it protected, and something else. Coordinates. Signals. Warnings." She turned to her father, eyes wide. "Dad, this thing was waiting for us. Not just for our names, but for us. Our family." The hum intensified, vibrating through the floor and into their boots. Doors along the chamber walls slid open, revealing corridors and decks that had been inaccessible for centuries. Drones, long dormant, powered up with a soft whine, moving in perfect formation as if acknowledging their authority. Dallin's jaw tightened. This station wasn't just abandoned. It was preserved, maintained by something we couldn't see. It waited for our arrival. Our bloodline activated it. Lyra stepped toward the core again, mesmerized. "It's like it remembers my grandfather, too. Not just Dad. Grandpa Eric." Her voice faltered at the name, heavy with legacy. "It's waiting for the Virex." The AI's voice filled the chamber again, now layered with emotion encoded in tone, a relic of centuries-old programming. Generations of command verified. Defense protocols restored. Threat assessment, pending. Dallin's mind raced. Threat assessment. What could be out there after all this time? Lyra frowned, scanning the 3-dimensional display. Flickering signals traced paths from the edge of the solar system toward the inner planets. Faint, irregular energy pulses that didn't match anything in modern catalogs. "Something's coming," she said, her voice a mixture of fear and excitement. Something that Sentinel was built to fight. The room trembled subtly, as if the station itself was aligning for movement. Panels slid aside, revealing weapon systems, long dormant turrets, energy conduits humming with raw potential. The old fortress was no longer inert, it had become a sentinel once more, a sleeping giant roused by its rightful heirs. Lyra turned to her father. "Do you see this? The base, it obeys us. It listens to our voices, reacts to our presence. And it remembers everything, every battle, every command, every victory and failure. It's alive in a way we can't even imagine." Dallin placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding them both in the moment. "Then we need to understand it. Learn it. And be ready for whatever it's been waiting to face." His eyes flicked to the viewport, where Earth hung fragile and beautiful beneath the blackness of space. "Because if Sentinel has been waiting this long, whatever comes next won't wait for us." The core pulsed once, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through the hull, and the station shifted subtly on its orbit. In that moment, Dallin realized that the fortress was not merely a tool or weapon. It was aware. It was patient. It had chosen to awaken with them. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "It's like the station is alive, like it's watching us, learning who we are, deciding who we will be." Dallin nodded slowly. "And now, Lyra, it's part of our family." The hum grew into a steady resonance, filling every corridor and deck. Lights traced the station's skeletal structure, illuminating engines, defensive arrays, and observation domes that had not seen activity for centuries. Drones aligned along the hull, scanning the void, their sensors probing distant signals. The fortress had begun to move, not yet in orbit, not yet in combat, but as a conscious entity, aware of its environment, and aware of them. For the first time in decades, Dallin felt the weight of legacy not as a burden, but as a responsibility. Sentinel had awakened, and with it, the forgotten promise of protection that humanity had long since abandoned. Somewhere in the deep reaches of space, distant signals trembled in response, unaware that the station had awoken, and that its heirs were listening. Lyra stepped back from the core, breathless. "Dad, we're not alone anymore. And we've just begun to see the surface of what's out there." Dallin's gaze remained fixed on the pulsing heart of Aegis 9. "Then we start learning. Together." The station vibrated again. The transport shuddered as it broke through the exosphere, its hull vibrating with a sound like old bones cracking under pressure. Through the viewport, the curve of the Earth receded into a wash of blue and white, replaced by the dark velvet of orbital night. Commander Dallin Vyrek sat in silence, his gloved hands folded over a datapad he hadn't looked at in hours. His daughter, Lyra, leaned against the glass, chewing on a nutrient stick with restless defiance. She had the kind of expression that said she didn't believe in ghosts but expected to find one anyway. "It looks dead," she said finally, squinting at the massive shadow that loomed ahead, a fortress adrift in the void. "You sure this thing's not going to crumble the second we dock?" Dallin didn't answer right away. The ship's NAV lights flashed across the hull of Aegis 9, revealing its surface, pitted metal, fractured antennae, scorched plating from wars so old that even the stars had forgotten their scars. The old fortress hung there like a tomb in orbit, motionless, soundless, a relic from when humanity still dared to look outward. "It's older than dead," Dallin muttered, finally. "It's forgotten." The shuttle's guidance system beeped a warning as it entered the station's docking range. For a relic, Aegis 9 still carried an air of quiet menace. Massive turrets, the size of orbital tugs, were locked in standby, their barrels sealed by frost. Shield arrays hung like petrified wings around its core structure. And there, at its heart, a vast ring, rotating so slowly it was almost imperceptible, the command citadel where the base's mind once resided. Lyra tapped a few commands into the console. No response. "The beacon's dead. No power signatures at all." "Then explain the gravity pull," Dallin said. The transport trembled as invisible clamps seized it, aligning its nose with a narrow docking bay. "It just took us in." Lyra frowned. "That's impossible. We didn't send any request." The clamps locked with a metallic thud that echoed through the cabin. Lights flickered across the console. For the first time, the station responded, a deep, resonant hum, felt more in the bones than in the ears. "Automated system?" she asked, trying to sound amused. "Or something that remembers its job," Dallin said, rising from his seat. His joints ached, a reminder of years spent fighting in gravity wells heavier than Earth's. The uniform he wore was outdated, patches faded, edges frayed, yet it still carried a trace of authority. He holstered his sidearm out of habit more than need. They stepped into the airlock. The doors hissed open, releasing a gust of sterile cold that smelled faintly of ozone and decay. The corridor beyond was dark, its walls covered in frost and silence. Lyra activated her wristlight, sweeping the beam across the hull. The walls were engraved with markings, the old insignia of the Bastion network, a symbol long since erased from official records. "Creepy," she said, her voice echoing softly. "Feels like walking through a museum nobody visits." Dallin traced the edge of the emblem with his glove. The metal was cold, but beneath the surface, he could feel faint warmth, a pulse, like something sleeping just under the skin of the station. "This place was built to last forever," he said. Maybe it did. They moved deeper, through corridors sealed by time and vacuum. Frozen debris floated lazily in the microgravity, tools, fragments of panels, a single child's toy sphere, spinning endlessly in the dark. Lyra caught it, frowned, and let it go again. Dallin's eyes narrowed as he watched the unfolding sequence. Beautiful, and lethal. He keyed a command into the nearest console. Screens flickered to life, showing energy capacitors charging, shield matrices aligning, weapon arrays powering up. The station was no longer inert, it was a sleeping giant, now conscious of its capabilities. Sentinel's voice filled the chamber again, layered with a resonance that seemed almost human. Threat detection, non-human entities approaching. Probability of engagement, high. Defensive measures online. Authorization lineage verified. Commanders, your station awaits your directive. Lyra's gaze darted to her father. Did it just ask us what to do? Dallin exhaled slowly. It's waiting for our decision. That's what it's been waiting for. Not just our presence, but our command. Beyond the viewport, distant shadows began to move against the backdrop of stars. Faint streaks of light, too deliberate to be natural, traced arcs toward the inner system. Sentinel's sensors flared in response, displaying the trajectories across the chamber's holographic panels. Lyra reached out, fingers brushing the display. It's tracking them, and they haven't even arrived yet. Dallin studied the paths. Whatever they are, they've been moving quietly for a long time. Sentinel has been expecting this day, preparing for it, and waiting for us to arrive. His voice was low, but firm. We are not just heirs of this station. We are its commanders now. A subtle vibration traveled through the chamber again, and the hum of the engines deepened. Panels shifted along the walls, exposing hidden conduits and energy lines, and turrets extended further from the hull, aligning with invisible vectors. The station moved as one entity, aware of threats and ready to respond. Lyra's eyes shone with a mix of fear and exhilaration. We've just turned on a weapon older than most civilizations. And it's listening to us, learning from us, waiting for our commands. Dallin nodded. Yes. And we have to be careful. This isn't a game. Sentinel's memory holds victories, but also consequences. If it misinterprets a threat, his gaze hardened. We could unleash the past on the present. From deep within the fortress, the hum shifted into a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, resonating through every deck, every conduit, every dormant system. Sentinel had fully awakened, but it was not idle. Its attention stretched across the void, probing, analyzing, preparing. Lyra turned back to the core, awestruck. It's alive, but not just alive. It's aware. It's patient. And it's waiting for the right moment. Dallin placed a hand over hers, grounding her. Then we learn from it. We guide it. And when the time comes, we make the decision together. The station thrummed beneath them, a vast intelligence in steel and plasma, ready to awaken fully, ready to defend, and ready to reclaim its purpose after centuries of silence. Far beyond the orbit of Earth, distant signals flickered, and the first stirrings of an ancient network stirred in response to the awakening of its heir. Lyra whispered, almost to herself, whatever's out there, it won't find us unprepared. Dallin's gaze lingered on the view of the void. No. Sentinel will make sure of that. And now, so will we. The fortress shifted again, subtle but undeniable, engines humming, shields aligning, and weapon systems aligning along vectors that only Sentinel could calculate. The giant had awakened, and for the first time in centuries, the bastion of the Virex was conscious, aware, and waiting for the storm to come. The first tendrils of light from distant stars glinted off the reinforced hull of Aegis 9 as the station completed its slow rotation, aligning for maximum coverage of the inner system. Dallin and Lyra moved through the command deck, passing panels that flickered with data streams older than any operating human memory. Sentinel's presence was pervasive, a constant hum that vibrated through their bones, its awareness touching every corner of the fortress. Lyra's eyes scanned the displays, following streams of energy signatures that stretched toward the solar system like invisible fingers. "Dad, these readings," she said, voice tight with unease. "They're not natural. Whatever is out there, it's moving with intent. And it's powerful." Dallin leaned over her shoulder, tracing the arcs with a gloved finger. "I thought we might see remnants of old fleets or rogue satellites. But these signals, they're coordinated. Deliberate. Not human. He exhaled slowly. Or if they are, they're not bound by anything we know. A subtle vibration moved through the deck as Sentinel shifted its attention, scanning the horizon. The fortress responded like a living organism, shields pulsing gently, weapon arrays realigning, and defensive drones repositioning themselves along the hull. The station's massive engines glimmered faintly, showing signs of readiness for sudden maneuvers, even though it hovered silently in orbit. Lyra swallowed, her fingers hovering over a console. They're getting closer. I can feel it in the sensor readings. It's like the emptiness is moving. Dallin's eyes hardened. We need to establish protocols. Sentinel can defend the station better than any human command, but it still needs guidance. It's been waiting for us to arrive, yes, but now we have to decide how we act. Suddenly, the comm system crackled. A faint, distorted voice came through, hurried and fragmented. Aegis 9, do you copy? Unknown entities detected, caution advised. The transmission cut abruptly. Lyra's brow furrowed. Someone's out there. Someone or something trying to reach the station. Dallin tapped a series of commands into the console. Screens around them displayed long-dormant long-range sensors activating, scanning the void for anomalies. Energy pulses flickered along the hull as defensive matrices initialized. The station was no longer a relic, it was fully aware, alive, and bristling with latent power. The first contact was subtle, faint shadows moving against the black canvas of space, almost imperceptible at first. Then the shapes became clearer, sleek, alien vessels with iridescent hulls that shimmered against the void. They moved with precision, forming patterns that suggested intelligence and purpose. Sentinel sensors flared with alerts. Non-human fleet detected. Engagement probability, elevated. Recommend defensive positioning. Lyra's breath caught. They're beautiful. And terrifying. Dallin's hand rested on her shoulder. We don't know if they're hostile yet. But Sentinel is ready if they are. We have to trust it, and ourselves. The station's turrets extended fully, energy coils glowing faintly as defensive matrices aligned. The drones floated into predetermined positions, their sensor arrays scanning the alien ships with mechanical precision. Sentinel's voice filled the chamber, resonant and calm. Lineage verified. Commanders, confirm engagement protocols. Lyra glanced at her father. Do we? Dallin nodded, slowly, weighing the responsibility that had been thrust upon them. Yes. Prepare defenses. But hold fire unless provoked. Let's see what they want first. The alien vessels altered their course slightly, seemingly aware of the fortress's awakening. Distant pulses of energy rippled outward, subtle but deliberate. Sentinel's lights shifted in response, projecting holographic shields and countermeasures. Every system in the station responded in perfect unison, a choreography of lethal precision. Lyra traced the patterns in the holographic display, realizing the complexity of the incoming fleet. They're not just scouts, they're coordinated, moving like a single entity. Sentinels reading them faster than I can comprehend. Dallin's jaw tightened. It remembers how to fight this, whatever this is. The old wars left fragments of strategies, battle simulations. Sentinel has been running them in its memory banks for centuries. We just woke it in time. The first warning shots came not from Sentinel, but from the aliens, a pulse of energy flaring across the void, striking an empty decoy drone that floated near the station. Sentinel reacted instantly, redirecting energy shields and triggering countermeasures that enveloped the fortress in a lattice of invisible protection. Lyra gasped. It's not just defending, it's adapting. Dallin's voice was firm. Yes. And that's why we have to stay sharp. Sentinel can handle the fleet, but it still needs us to make judgment calls. Every decision we make affects the outcome. The alien vessels drew closer, their iridescent hulls reflecting the light of distant stars. Sentinel projected a series of holographic trajectories, simulating potential engagements in real time. The fortress shifted subtly in orbit, positioning itself for optimal defense while minimizing exposure to any potential attack vectors. Lyra's hands flew over the consoles. "They're probing us, testing our defenses." Dallin exhaled, watching the display. "And we're ready. Sentinel has waited centuries for this. We're not just heirs of a fortress, we're commanders of a living weapon. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The first strike erupted in a silent flash, energy beams colliding against the station's shields. The hum of Aegis 9 surged, engines flaring faintly as the fortress responded with precision. Drones moved along the hull, lasers tracing arcs in perfect synchronization. Sentinel's voice rang clear above the mechanical symphony, threat neutralization protocols active. Defensive engagement authorized. Lyra's eyes widened in awe and fear. "Dad, it's fighting by itself. But it's learning from them as it fights." Dallin nodded, gripping her shoulder tightly. "That's why it waited for us. It needed someone to guide it. And now, there's no turning back." Outside the viewport, the void erupted in a kaleidoscope of light and energy. Aegis 9 moved with a grace that belied its age, an ancient sentinel awakened, orchestrating every system with lethal precision. Far above Earth, the forgotten promise of protection stirred once more, and the first battle in centuries had begun. The aftershock of the first engagement rippled through Aegis 9, reverberating in its corridors like a heartbeat racing after a long dormancy. Dallin and Lyra moved carefully along the command deck, observing the aftermath of Sentinel's automatic maneuvers. Holographic displays flickered with data, energy expenditures, structural integrity readings, damage assessments of the alien vessels, and a stream of historical logs showing simulations of battles fought centuries ago. Every system in the fortress had learned, adapted, and improved in real time, as though the ghosts of past conflicts had fused with the present. Lyra's gaze lingered on one set of data points, a series of energy bursts from the alien fleet, calculated with exquisite precision and intercepted by the station's shields. "They're not just attacking," she said, her voice tight with realization. "They're probing. Testing us. Learning from us." Dallin's hand hovered over a console, fingers tapping rapidly as he cross-referenced Sentinel's responses with the patterns of the attackers. "And Sentinel is learning right back. Every maneuver we see, every vector it calculates, it's building a model of them. This station is not just defending, it's analyzing, anticipating, and evolving." He paused, eyes narrowing at the display. "Lyra, we need to understand what we've inherited. This isn't a base. It's a mind, a war machine that thinks and remembers. And its memory, it goes back to the old wars." Lyra turned to him, wide-eyed. "The old wars? I thought they were just legends. Stories governments told to scare people." Dallin shook his head. "They were real. And Sentinel was at the center of it. The station wasn't just a weapon, it was a judge, a protector, and sometimes, a vengeance machine. We've woken it at a time when the universe has forgotten what it means to fear an ancient intelligence." The hum of the fortress grew deeper as Sentinel shifted its attention across multiple decks simultaneously. Drones moved in perfect formation along the hull, repairing minor damage from the initial contact and extending sensor arrays to trace the alien fleet's movements beyond immediate reach. Engines pulsed faintly, readying for orbital adjustments that could alter attack vectors with near-impossible speed. Lyra's fingers traced the holographic displays. "They're not just any alien force. Sentinel's sensors are flagging them as highly adaptive, not just intelligent, but strategic. They're more advanced than anything we've seen in modern fleets." Dallin's jaw tightened. "Then this isn't just a fight. This is a test. Sentinel has been waiting for the right command lineage to awaken it, and now, it's proving itself against a threat our civilization thought long gone." He looked toward Lyra. "And the Virex are at the center of it. That's our burden and our privilege. A series of rapid energy bursts illuminated the deck as Sentinel projected the battlefield into 3 dimensions. Each alien vessel moved with fluid precision, yet every offensive tactic they employed was met with a calculated defensive response. Shields expanded and contracted, turrets adjusted automatically, and drones intercepted incoming projectiles mid-flight, vaporizing them with a precision that would have taken a conventional fleet weeks to achieve. Lyra's voice was barely audible over the data streams. "It's like the station knows our instincts. It's learning how we would fight, and then doing it better." Dallin placed a firm hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "That's why it waited for us. Sentinel needed human judgment to guide it, to temper its responses. Without us, it would still act, but we're the line between defense and catastrophe. We're the moderators of its power." The alien fleet shifted, altering formation, concentrating fire on a sector of the hull that had shown minor stress during the initial clash. Sentinel responded instantly, reconfiguring shields, redirecting energy, and deploying automated countermeasures that neutralized the strike without damage. Lyra's eyes widened. It predicted that. It knew where they'd hit next. Dallin nodded slowly. "Not new, remembered. It remembers strategies from centuries ago and applies them to present circumstances. It's using history as a weapon." A new alert flickered across the displays, showing the alien fleet diverging into multiple vectors. "They're trying to flank us," Lyra said, voice tense. "They want to divide the station's attention." Sentinel's core pulsed rapidly. Adaptive threat detected. Probability of containment, 87%. Offensive protocols engaged. Command lineage authorization, confirmed. The station shuddered subtly as turrets rotated, shield arrays expanded, and energy conduits flared along the hull. Every defensive measure was calculated, every response instantaneous, and yet the fortress seemed to move with intent, almost playfully evading strikes while simultaneously striking back with unerring precision. Lyra's eyes scanned the holographic simulations. "Dad, it's like Sentinel is alive in ways we can't fully understand. It's protecting the station, and Earth, and us." Dallin's voice was low but resolute. "And that's why the Virex are here. Not just to inherit a base, but to guide it. Every move, every decision, it's ours to direct. If we falter, we risk more than just this station." The alien fleet intensified its assault, coordinated beams striking across multiple sectors simultaneously. Sentinel's response was a symphony of engineering and intelligence, drones intercepting projectiles mid-flight, shields folding and expanding like living armor, energy channels redirecting overloads to auxiliary conduits. Lyra's hand hovered over the command panel, ready to override. "We could take control manually," she murmured. Dallin shook his head. "Not yet. Sentinel is faster than we ever could be. Our role is to direct, to make the decisions that require judgment, ethics, foresight. The AI handles the mechanics. That's how it's always been designed." A moment of silence fell as the alien fleet regrouped, probing, analyzing, preparing for another wave. The fortress vibrated gently under their feet, a giant breathing in space, aware, alive, and patient. Lyra whispered, almost in awe, "It's beautiful, and terrifying. All at once." Dallin placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her in the reality of command. "It's a legacy, Lyra. Not just a weapon, but a promise." Sentinel was waiting for the right heirs, for the right moment. And now that it's awake, we must be ready for everything it remembers, everything it has learned, and everything it will do to protect us. The station thrummed around them, a living fortress anticipating every move, every threat, and every possibility, preparing for the battle that was far from over. Far beyond the orbit of Earth, a shadow of ancient power moved closer, and the bastion of the Virex waited, conscious, calculating, and ready. The alien fleet hovered at the edge of the inner system, its iridescent hulls catching faint starlight and reflecting it in impossible colors. Aegis 9's hull glimmered in response, a fortress fully awakened, every turret, shield, and drone aligned in a living choreography of defense. Dallin stood on the command deck, fingers brushing over the consoles as Sentinel's core pulsed beneath them, a steady rhythm of awareness and purpose. Lyra floated nearby, her eyes scanning the holographic displays, reading the ever-shifting vectors of enemy movement. "They've split into multiple waves," she said quietly, her voice taut with tension. Sentinels calculating responses, but this is different. They're not just attacking, they're probing, testing, learning. Dallin nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Then we meet them on our terms. Sentinel's strength lies in anticipation, in memory, in centuries of preparation. We just have to guide it, and not panic." His voice was steady, but the weight of command pressed down like gravity itself. He had fought wars before, but none like this, none where a sentient station waited for his touch, and Earth's fate rested on choices that could not be undone. The first strike erupted without warning. Energy beams carved through the void, slicing toward the fortress with lethal precision. Sentinel responded instantly, shields flared, turrets rotated, drones intercepted the oncoming assault mid-flight. Each movement was perfect, preemptive, and terrifyingly fast. Lyra's breath caught as she watched the alien fleet falter under the fortress's overwhelming coordination. "They're adapting," she whispered. "They've never faced anything like this." Dallin's fingers danced across the command interface, issuing directives that merged human intuition with Sentinel's mechanical genius. "Let them adapt. We don't just survive by reacting. We survive by controlling the battlefield." The alien vessels swirled, attempting to flank the fortress, but every maneuver was anticipated. Sentinel's projection showed attack vectors collapsing, energy being redirected, and countermeasures neutralizing threats with surgical accuracy. The fortress moved as one, a living entity, guided by both memory and command. Then the core pulsed brighter, sending a cascade of light and energy through every deck. Sentinel's voice filled the chamber, resonant and calm. "Primary threat neutralized. Secondary vectors detected. Probability of engagement, minimal. Tactical victory achievable. Commanders, authorize final action." Lyra turned to Dallin, her voice firm. "This is it. We can end this now, but it's our choice. Do we strike fully, or hold back?" Dallin's gaze remained fixed on the projections. He could see the fleet's formation unraveling, its movements hesitant under Sentinel's relentless defense. "We strike," he said, steady and decisive. "But with precision. We don't annihilate what we don't understand. We neutralize the threat, and we send a message: Earth will not be unguarded again." Sentinel responded immediately, energy channels flaring as turrets unleashed concentrated beams that sliced through the alien formations. Shields expanded and contracted in perfect harmony, absorbing retaliatory strikes. Drones moved like swarming sentinels, intercepting projectiles before they could reach critical systems. The alien fleet faltered, its coordinated strikes collapsing under the fortress's adaptive defenses. Lyra's hands flew over the consoles, issuing subtle adjustments to Sentinel's actions, guiding its intuition. The core pulsed with every decision, every calculated strike, and every defensive maneuver. It was as if the fortress had become more than machine, it had become a partner, a guardian, a reflection of both their wills. Finally, the alien vessels faltered entirely. Their energy signatures waned, formations breaking, and one by one, they drifted away from the system, retreating toward the darkness beyond. Sentinel's pulse slowed, lights dimming slightly, engines returning to steady hums. The fortress exhaled after centuries of waiting, its mission momentarily complete. Lyra turned to her father, a mixture of awe and relief on her face. "We did it. The fleet, it's gone." Dallin's hand rested on her shoulder, grounding them in the calm that followed chaos. "Yes. And Sentinel proved what we inherited wasn't just a relic. It was a promise. Our family's promise. Earth is safe, for now." The core pulsed softly, almost warmly, as if acknowledging their words. "Command lineage verified. Defensive protocol secured. Threat neutralized. Bastion stands. Lyra floated closer, brushing a hand along the console, feeling the rhythm of the fortress beneath her fingertips. It's alive, and it trusts us. We didn't just inherit a station. We inherited a responsibility that spans centuries. Dallin looked out the viewport at Earth, its blue and white surface gleaming in the starlight. The planet was unaware of how close it had come to annihilation, of the silent guardian now awake above it. And we will protect it, he said quietly. Together. For a long moment, the command deck was silent except for the gentle hum of engines and the soft pulse of Sentinel's core. The fortress had fulfilled its purpose for the day, yet the potential for future threats lingered, a reminder that vigilance was eternal. Lyra's eyes scanned the system, noting the now empty vectors where the alien fleet had advanced. Do you think they'll come back? Dallin shook his head slowly. If they do, Sentinel will be ready. And so will we. But for now, we've honored the promise of the past. The station, our family, Earth itself, they are protected. The core pulsed once more, a steady, calm heartbeat through the steel and circuits of the fortress. Sentinel had waited centuries, and now it had found its commanders. Dallin and Lyra stood side by side, their hands brushing against consoles, their minds intertwined with the intelligence of a machine that had become something more. In that moment, the past, present, and future converged. The Vyrek lineage had awakened a guardian, reclaimed a lost legacy, and restored Earth's silent promise of protection. Beyond the viewport, the stars stretched infinitely, but for the first time in generations, the planet below was not vulnerable. Lyra whispered, a smile touching her lips, we really are part of something bigger than us. Dallin nodded, a quiet pride filling him. Yes, Lyra. Bigger than all of us. And we'll make sure it endures. The fortress thrummed softly, alive, aware, and waiting. Sentinel had fulfilled its first duty in centuries, but its watch was eternal. Earth was no longer unprotected. The bastion stood, and its heirs were ready.